What's up everybody, welcome back to another Manny Vids. Today I want to talk about variable neutral density filters and why they're so important for photography and for video. So recently Mckinnon came out with his own variable neutral density filter. He teamed up with the guys over at Pro Filters and they developed this pretty wicked cool new ND filter. And what I like about this filter is it's made of some great materials. The glass I think is made out of quartz. It has click neutral density stops, and you can go from like 1 all the way to 6, and I think they sell a couple of different ones, but it is a pretty cool filter. The only problem with this neutral density filter is, like most neutral density filters, they bolt on, or screw on I should say, to the front of your lens. And so if you're doing a wedding event, if you're doing any event that takes place in the afternoon, let's say between the hours of 12 and 3, and you want that beautiful blurry bokeh in the background, basically that's really difficult to get if you don't have a neutral density filter. So a neutral density filter, what that is, it's something like a pair of sunglasses, but for your camera lens, okay? So most of them, like I said, screw onto the front of your lens. But let's say you have 3 different lenses you're using: a 16 to 35, a prime 24, a 70 to 200. All of those usually won't have the same amount on the front of the lens cap. Some of them don't even have screw-on, so you'll have to use some form of adapters. So that means you're switching in between cameras, and you're also needing to switch neutral density filters. Now, of course, you might have purchased a lot of neutral density filters, each one for each specific lens, but if you're gonna buy neutral density filters, you need to buy quality neutral density filters. And the one Mckinnon recently released is a very good quality one. It's why it's like almost $250 for it, right? But if you are the owner of a Canon EOS R or a Canon EOS RP, you're even in better luck and fortunate than most camera owners. And the reason why is because they recently released this Canon's very own EF to RF neutral density filter variable. And what's so awesome about this, if you guys don't understand what neutral density filter does, like I said, it takes that light coming in through your lens. So let's say you have something like this Canon 70 to 200 millimeter lens, right? That does 2.8 aperture. Now you want that background blur. You know, to get that, you'll have to open it up wide aperture to about 2.8, or if you have a lens that does 1.2, like a Canon 50 millimeter 1.2. The problem is, again, if it's in the afternoon between the hours of 1 and 3, and it's a really bright sunny day, it's almost impossible to open up the aperture that much without overexposing the picture. Now, you can switch your shutter speeds, you can do those things, but you might want different effects. And shutter speed, ISO, all that stuff really affects what the picture is going to look like at the end, whether it's video or photo. Now, for video, it's much more difficult to really get that wide aperture without an ND filter, because you're sort of stuck the 180 rule, right? So if you're filming at 24 frames a second, you want to do the 180 rule, which is double the shutter speed, so 48 or 1/48 of a second, right? So you're sort of stuck at that point. But now if you open up that aperture to 1.8 or 2.8, you're going to overexpose the picture. So that's where the neutral density filter will come in for video people. For photo, it's really the same thing, but again, you can adjust things like the shutter speed, make it really high, or or the ISO really low. But still, if the sun is really bright and overhead, it still might not work as well as if you had a neutral density filter. So now, what's the difference between Mckinnon's neutral density filter that mounts on the front versus Canon's neutral density filter that is an adapter that mounts to the back of the lens? Now, what's great about Canon's neutral density filter, which you'll find in their video cameras as well, is that because it mounts to the back, the light is not distorted when it comes to the front of the lens. So what will end up happening if you mounted a neutral density filter to the front of your lens, what you'll have is a distortion of light, because that light hits that neutral density filter before it hits that glass that expensive glass in this case, and then it distorts it. You might have colors might be off a little, you know, tints and hues might just not look right. But with the neutral density filter in the back, that natural light that you're capturing outside is still working its way through here, so that these lenses are filtering and adjusting that light before it hits the neutral density filter and then hits your sensor. And that makes for a way better cinematic experience, a way better cinematic look, both in picture and in video. So although I really like Peter Mckinnon's new neutral density filter, and maybe in the future I'll even get one, as long as I'm using the Canon R or RP, I mean, I'm sticking with this all the way. And show you guys how just how dark this gets. I mean, this is pretty incredible. Goes almost, you know, completely dark and opens up. So you got from I believe this is 1 to 6 stops if I'm not correct. I'm sure I'll just post it at the bottom. But I mean, it's really cool. So you can take all your EF lenses and not only mount them to your R and RPs, but you can now have it where you have that neutral density filter sitting right back there. And I mean, this is pretty awesome. And it slides right out. And what's cool about that is Canon's also creating other filters, like a polarized filter, and other filters are coming out soon, where you can also just, instead of having neutral density filter, maybe it's nighttime, or maybe you want to take care of some of those reflections that are bouncing off of glass or windshields, and just slide those in, and bam, you're like completely ready to go. But yeah, this is absolutely an awesome neutral density filter, variable neutral density filter. And I recommend every wedding photographer, every videographer get one of these, especially if you have the new Canon R or RP. And of course, I still recommend you get the Peter Mckinnon one. If you don't, if you have a Sony, a Fujifilm, I recommend trying out Peter Mckinnon's neutral density filter. It is a great high quality piece of glass. It is priced super fair, because these things go up as high as $500, $600 and more. And at $250, it's pretty much a good deal. I mean, it has things that I like especially that click neutral density ring, that you can go 2, 3, 4, 5, and you know you're right on the money. So when you're filming or you're taking pictures, you don't have to worry about this, how do you say, I call it an X shadow. It's just like this shadow that forms over the lens if you don't change to the density correctly. If you're stuck like in between 1 and 2 stops, it just creates this weird like shadow effect. And so what Peter Mckinnon and Polar Pro filters did was make it so it has these nice clicky stops, so you end up right where you need to be. With Canons, I have not seen that effect. I think Canons is just right on the money. Every time you switch and turn this, it hits it right where it needs to be. And by the way, just in case some of you guys were wondering, the 70-200 is my go-to portrait lens. I really love this. This is Canon's brand new 70-200 millimeter IS USN 3 2.8 lens, and it is a phenomenal optical piece of equipment. And it's an expensive piece of equipment, but I recommend, if you're really out there and you're growing your business, to definitely invest in one of these. It is an amazing portrait lens. From 70-200, you can really just get that nice bokeh, and this creates some really nice bokeh. And again, this neutral density filter, I always use this. If I'm out there doing photo shoots in the afternoon, this is my lifesaver, and I'm so grateful to have this piece of equipment. I mean, especially with the new R. So again, this is the reason I invested in the Canon R series. Like I said, it's not as specced out as Sony, as Fuji, as so many of the other digital mirrorless cameras out there, but it's these kinds of accessories and this kind of quality glass that just keeps me coming back to Canon series. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for another video. Please like, share, subscribe. This is Manny Vids. Peace out.